Welcome back, everybody that might be watching, might be listening. We recently began a series. I'm going to look at the camera because we started a series based on relationships, right? And so if you haven't heard the other episodes, feel free to check them out. But this one is designed to be a companion to the romantic relationships episode. Uh, as most people are familiar, a lot of people understand or have been raised with some sort of framework about long-term monogamous relationships, or people who just don't get married at all, maybe are abstinent their whole life, whatever, arranged marriages. But we thought it could be helpful. James had a friend send him a post from the Holistic Psychologist. You can find her on Instagram, the Holistic Psychologist. But she had a post that was really good that effectively describes the general framework of romantic relationships that could exist. And we just thought it could be of some benefit to bounce between some of those and just explore them for a little bit. So thank you to James for bringing that. Now, out the gate, how you do that? So James will kick us off, but yeah, so we're not going to spend that much time probably on the monogamy long-term relationship because you basically have a framework for that. We might talk about it some, but we want to explore the things that some of y'all out there listening, watching, may not be that familiar with and could either, this is what we basically challenge you with, is to, as we go over these, consider to yourself the relationship, if you're in one right now, if you're dating, whatever, think about in what category you may fall in presently. And then after that, ask yourself if that's actually the best situation for what is actually taking place in your relationship. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're in a committed relationship with somebody, right? You've been dating 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. But let's just say that both parties also have additional partners outside of that relationship that they're not telling each other about. They know it's happening, but they don't discuss it. Well, there is a relationship in here that might be better suited for y'all's actual situation than explicit, supposed long-term monogamy. So just keep that in mind. Now, the first relationship we have is the intentionally single. And she defines this, the holistic psychologist, as a conscious choice to not engage in a romantic relationship. Now, do we want to go through all of these and then circle back, or we want to go?
Yeah, let's go high level on every. Let's just name, definition, and then we'll come back around. Yeah, absolutely.
I like it. So after that, we have polyamorous or polyamory. And this is a practice of engaging in intimate relationships with multiple partners who all consent. Big difference. All right. Now we have flow exploration, which is meeting new people and exploring relationships without commitment. We also have marriage by design, and that is a marriage that's chosen for various factors that might not center around love or commitment in the traditional sense. We also have committed partnership, and that's a partnership that is chosen for long-term monogamous commitment that does not involve marriage. And then you have open relationship, which is an agreement created by both parties to allow for relationships outside of their own. And that is the bucket that most relationships fall under. So let's circle back around to the front with intentionally single.
I've intentionally been single many times for many, many years. Can you hit me on the definition again, what she defines it as?
A conscious choice to not engage in a romantic relationship.
So I think a discernment needs to be made between conscious and unconscious. I think there's a lot of people that I know personally that are single, but not by design. They're single because they don't feel like anyone fits that role of who they're looking for, or they feel like and through self-sabotage, they don't deserve XYZ. I think it's interesting. A lot of people don't actually pursue or give themselves a space to pursue being intentionally single because they think, based on Hallmark, Valentine's Day, and everywhere else, that you must have bae. You must have someone at home when you have holidays, when you're getting together with family and friends. But I think being intentionally single, if that's something that you want to give space to, you need to do it. You need to commit to that. It's given me massive clarity on a lot of things that I don't want because I had the time to think without someone up in my ear.
Yeah, man. To me, this is the phase where everybody must spend some time. Now, I'm not going to say that you should spend more time on this in this phase than in a relationship, because I think that'd be weird to do if you are looking for a relationship ultimately. But I've known some people who it seemed like they never went through any intentionally single phase, and if they were single, it was like a mad dash to replace that old relationship, that old framework with something else. And I think that, at least in my experience, seeing that, it's caused those people more harm than good. And in moments where, I have tried to rush into a fling or, try to get some ass because like, oh, damn, I want some ass. Like, it almost never wound up good, or I just entirely left the situation when it came down to the moment of truth because I knew something just misaligned. So, especially after my past relationship, even though it wasn't years and years I went being single, I took a very deliberate amount of, time to just focus on me again. Some people use the phrase like date yourself, where it's like I got excited because I was going to get off work and then I was going to go to a restaurant, get some chocatini, and then pull back up to the crib, watch some Amazon Prime, lay and sound bathe in some solfeggio tones and make some beats. Like, if you can't spend a good time by yourself, why would anybody else want to be with you?
Oh, I think that's an interesting point that you bring up, because I think a lot of people never date themselves. So they don't realize that when they have certain reactions to things, they have certain emotional reactions to things, or they are looking for something that they never find it. They never find it. You're projecting and you're putting out the wrong you because you're just in search of something else. I think being intentionally single is a very beneficial thing, and I think we should definitely, the Holistic Psychologist, is trying to evangelize it. These things should not be taboo. I totally agree. I mean, people need to give more space to being intentionally single. I think that there would be much more self-growth. There'd be much more self-awareness. And I think it gives you the space to, if you choose, work on your trauma.
Amen. Took the words out of my mouth, man. Yeah, this is if you're not in any of the other buckets, you should return by default to this stage and work on becoming whole. Because that's ultimately going to make whatever relationship that's not intentionally single flourish or have a better chance of flourishing, in my experience. All right. So after that, we have the opposite, damn near, which is polyamory. And that is a practice of engaging in intimate relationships with multiple partners who all consent. Now, interesting thing here is I'd heard of this type of stuff, in the Bible, and, one of my homeboys, Keaton, we'd had some conversations in the past where he was like, yeah, man, like it's, you can have as many wives as you want as long as you support them and and part of it was for shock value, but part of it too, he's very, very serious, but it is an interesting thing to evaluate if you look through history and just see when these things were common, but who were they common from, and even shows that we've seen on TV in the last couple decades where it's like that type of shit going on. But basically what happened was the partner I'm with now, Haley, she had some friends who were polyamorous. And I had never known any people personally that were polyamorous, or at least it wasn't disclosed to me. And a super interesting event was, it was a New Year's Eve, and we were invited over to their home. And so it's Haley and I, we're not polyamorous. And we pull up.
You sure?
I'm sure. And we get there, and it's the two people. And I will say this too, for people who may not have context. A lot of times in polyamorous relationships, there's still a focus. There's still a main partner. So it's like you could have Joe and Jill, and they are more or less the main one for each other. But then they may be, occasionally dating another person tangentially, but it doesn't take away necessarily from the core, Jack and Jill, Joe and Jill, whoever I just said. So Joe and Jill, they live together, right? We go over to their house. They got dogs, all this shit. They've been together for years. But Joe has started dating Jane. And so then it's Joe, his main partner, Jill, and it's Jane on New Year's Eve. And then the big question in everybody's mind is like, yo, who is he kissing at midnight? The shit get crazy. But what I'll say I like the most about this relationship, and I feel like it's a little bit different than an open relationship, is it forces people to be almost the most mature potentially out of any of these other dynamics if they involve other people outside of a monogamous one-to-one pairing, because of the consent. And usually, at least from my understanding and talking to them, with the polyamory, there is an emphasis on communicating. Oftentimes the people know each other, that are the tangential relationships. They hang out with each other. Whereas, and we'll get to this, an open relationship, to my understanding of it, usually there is the rule that it is allowed to be open, but often the rule is you don't talk about it. Don't tell me about this person. Don't bring this person around. You know, all these other parameters that are basically more like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, you know, but do what you want. And I think that it's hard to really establish that level of trust when you don't actually have the information of what your main partner, you know, if Joe doesn't really know what Jill is up to in her open relationship, if Jill doesn't really know what Joe's up to in that open relationship, it could create more barriers. Whereas from my understanding and exposure to polyamory, that premium is placed on the communication.
Yeah, and I mean, when you break it down like that, I would say that I've never been in a polyamorous relationship, because there has been an understanding and an agreement and an arrangement that that I was seeing other people and those individuals were seeing other people, but there was never a, hey, we're going to all break bread together. Hey, we're going to all sit down and play patty cake. We're going to play Monopoly together. Like, there was none of that. There was almost so much in like a, don't ask, don't tell, close your eyes, I don't want to see, I know it's happening, and I'm okay with it happening as long as it's not in my face.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting. I think that I was first introduced to polyamorous relationships through Aubrey Marcus and Whitney Love.
Are they dating? Do they date?
Not anymore.
Okay.
Aubrey Marcus is married now, but for a while he and Whitney were they were in a polyamorous relationship, I guess you could say. There was massive open communication. They both spoke about it very publicly. But from what I see from both of them and what both of them said about it was that that was the most difficult relationship they've ever been in. They had a desire to pursue other people. They had a desire to pursue one another. But they had to literally light their egos on fire, swallow the pride, drown it out damn near, and had to work on themselves, because the polyamorous relationship really brought up all of their insecurities and put them on literally on their forehead. And so it's very interesting. I don't know anyone personally in my day-to-day that's running polyamorous. There are something that's not on the Holistic Psychologist on this thing that we're referencing is thruples, but that exists, and I do know a handful of people that are doing that, and that is, I think, another completely different bag that I don't understand either. Yeah. I don't have any experience in it. It seems but polyamorous to me, I don't think it should be off the table if it's something that you're both into exploring. But I think that from what I can see from Aubrey and Whitney and anyone else that they've spoken to about it, it's not easy. It's actually one of the more difficult relationships, especially because you're having to be honest with that person, looking eye to eye, right in front of them, that you don't want to only see them. Hey, you don't fulfill me, but I need you to not be upset about it. And I don't fulfill you, and I need to make sure I'm not upset about that. Interesting.
Yeah, and then just a side note that crossed my mind as you brought that up. I think one of the greatest benefits of something like this for the people who choose to engage in it is just like that extreme, like, whoa, this is difficult to manage. So there's going to be a lot of forced growth or it's not going to work. But the potential downside is you start to introduce more sexual partners. You're increasing the odds of somebody having a child unintentionally, and you're increasing the odds of catching some type of disease or just being put in a situation that you don't actually want to be in, because just like any relationship, just because something is working today and things are good now doesn't mean that there can't be moments where those things are challenged or some environment becomes unsafe or tested, whatever. So just something to keep in mind. All right. So then we have flow exploration, meeting new people, exploring relationships without commitment.
I have no I've never heard of this put that way. It is something that I think if I'm to look back, high level, detached from self, I feel like I've been in that spot too. I haven't been in the polyamorous spot, but I believe that I've been in that spot. They were like, I don't have a motive. I don't have a desired outcome. I'm just living. And I think it's interesting going from, and I think the majority of the time that I've spent, and the people around me that I've seen spend time doing that, it's not necessarily to realize some sort of gain physically, sexually, emotionally. It's literally to just
be,
just be in the moment, dance in the fountain at 4:00 in the morning, after, drinking a bottle of champagne with somebody or smoking a blunt or what. Like there's so many experiences that you can have that you don't have to be in this state to have. Mm-hmm. But I think that the way that she put this, I think it's pretty conducive for anybody that's trying to just enjoy, anyone that's trying to just explore, anyone that's just trying to, hey, I don't know what I want. Mm-hmm. I know I don't want any of these other buckets. I don't want to drop my ticket in those buckets. So I'm just going to live. Yeah. And I think it takes great strength to be comfortable with just living and taking life as it comes. Yeah. So many of us are here for loss aversion. So many of us are living in fear. So many of us are, if I can't logic my way to the end, I shouldn't do it. Yeah. That's dumb. You miss out on so much. Doesn't mean that you don't have to ever commit to anything, but I think that there's something that can be taken here and applied to the rest of your life. Like, you have to live. Yeah, everyone says, oh, you only live once. And I think that's bullshit. I really do. I think you only die in this plane once, in this carcass, in this meat sack. You only die once. You have a chance to live every damn day.
I love it, man. To me, this is like the epitome of like a carpe diem framework. Of like just that true, like, hey, I'm not forced. Where the intentionally single, I do still remain firm that that's where I think most people should spend most of their time if they're not in these other buckets. But then after that would be the flow exploration, in my assessment, because it leaves a person most open to, new experiences or happenstance events and not saying, because I think there's another trap some people fall into is, this is my type. I want a person like this. Like, we talked in some other episodes about really figuring out what
6 foot dark features.
Exactly.
We need this size booty. We need this size. We need this intellect. We need this job. This money.
Mm-hmm. And then they can wind up just blocking people's blessings because somebody missed one mark out of 99. Whereas with this, you go into a situation basically intentionally single, but willing to change that at a moment's notice. So that's interesting. I'd say that a good bit of college, the first part of college was kind of a combination of this for me, where it's like freshman year, I didn't have a committed relationship, but I was courting this one particular chick pretty consistently. And then after that, I was dealing with one girl consistently as well, but we were never dating, and it wasn't like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. I guess the main thing was I did request monogamy at some point because that's what I was observing. It was like a sexual
And she blocked
thing.
you?
You said what?
She blocked you? You tried to dunk it and you said, nope.
Nah. She was cool. She wanted to date. She was a nice girl, but it just, the vibe wasn't like that. But yeah, interesting place to be.
Not everyone serves every purpose in your life,
Yeah, man. All right. So then this one is intriguing to me because I feel like this is for a lot of people who want to optimize their life in a way, but it's the marriage by design. And once again, that's a marriage that's chosen for various factors that might not center around love or commitment in the traditional sense. Now, what this makes me think of is, for instance, people who want to survive together, right? Like, I don't know why I've got this feeling, but a lot of times when I see like a lot of these old Asian couples, this is what crosses my mind. It's like they got together and they effectively, maybe at some point they had a romantic, fire about them. But even after that kind of dwindled, they knew that their setup created the greatest opportunity in their life for some sort of thing that they both wanted to pursue. So let's just say, because it's an easy example for me to make, you got two people who are interested in permaculture, right? Being off-grid, sovereignty, fuck the system sort of thing. They may be attracted by some degree of romantic love, kind of that infatuation for each other. But let's just say that it was 3 reasons they were in a relationship with each other. If they're not equally 33%, or if the infatuation is not the plurality, then effectively you may actually be in a marriage by design. Even if you're not viewing it that way, it doesn't mean somebody has to enter into it like, oh, we're marrying so that we can get these tax breaks and we can go afford this, but I think effectively that would be my almost definition, is if the love, the fire, the passion, the romance, if that is not the majority of the reason that you're together, or the plurality, then it's probably some relationship based on design. But it's interesting how this could, differ from something else that we have later. But
there's
thoughts?
2 individuals in my close circle that have entered into or have almost entered into marriage by designs. And 50%, half of them were based on immigration status.
That's a great example too.
Needed to become a U.S. citizen to stay here when their visa was expiring. And I won't put them on blast, but
don't do that.
It is something that I've never considered. I have never dated somebody that did not have citizenship ever in my life, regardless of ethnicity or skin color or amount of melanin in their skin. Like, it has never crossed my mind. Like, oh damn, like, we might have to get legally married so you can do that. And effectively, wouldn't do it. That's fraud. But it is something that happens out there, day in, day out. And there's two people in my life that have almost entered into marriage by designs. And there's plenty of people, I feel like, and I don't know, this could be bastardization of what she's saying here, but what say you to the relationships that started in romance that have changed and people stay together for kids? Is that by design, to raise kids under that?
I think based on this definition, it would be, because there's, like, as we know, there's a lot of gradation, right? It's not like some people could marry each other, or rather, people can get married and then, in a way, lose, if we want to call it that, or the passion dwindle, but they still could be very fond of each other. It could go from being this burning infatuation, passion, erotic thing, to just being like a very deep fondness, like more of a kinship, more of a friendship that's very, very thorough. And I think particularly if people find themselves in that situation and they happen to have kids, then it can kind of make more sense to stay married, to minimize disruption that could happen to their lives individually. Let's say they built something up great, there was no prenup signed, and the whoever would be the one to lose the money, because there's always an assumption it's the male. It's whoever makes the most money. Whoever entered into it with more assets is the one who would lose those assets. But if there's that acknowledgement of like, hey, I'm not trying to put you in that position, we got a pretty good thing. Because then at that point, you could actually create a open relationship within a marriage by design, similar to what there was a lot of speculation for a long time around Will and Jada Smith. And then they finally realized it profited them to talk about it more publicly. And I'm not fully abreast. I just know they had some conversations about it in the meme, but the August Alsina thing, and Will crying. But I think there's a point to that of like, hey, people got to do what's best for them in their unique situation. And just because it's just a lot of gray area for people, but ultimately you got to make the best choice for yourself. And sometimes staying married, even if you're not in love anymore with that person in the way that marriage tries to imply, might actually be the best scenario, rather than divorcing, selling the house, splitting the kids up, moving districts, just so that you can see other people, when it's like everything else you would still stay on board for, So that's an interesting one, man. All right. Now, we have committed partnership. What we got on time? All right, bet. Just so y'all know, we try to be highly respectful of y'all's time, so sometimes we reference the time. All right. So committed partnership, a partnership that is chosen for long-term monogamous commitment that does not involve marriage. And then after that, we have open relationship, an agreement created by both parties to allow for relationships outside of their own. Which one of these two do you want to address? We could do both, and we could just fly through it.
Let's fly through the first one, and then let's spend more time on the open relationship.
All right, bet. Go ahead.
Give me the definition again for that.
Committed partnership, a partnership that is chosen for long-term monogamous commitment that does not involve marriage.
Okay, like domestic partnerships, like the legal breakdown of domestic partnership, technically. Because in spaces, so if I remember correctly, that really started as like when gay rights weren't a thing in states where you could not legally get married. You could enter into a domestic partnership where it was recognized by the law that you were in a committed relationship. And I think it's interesting because I think that this is talking about more emotionally, from the emotional standpoint than the legal standpoint. Yeah. But I do know that before there were gay rights and before marriage was federally or, and a state level recognized as more than just heterosexual conjoining of two individuals, I think that was something that I always just associated with, okay, well, that's what, when I was a kid, we had neighbors that were living together, and I'm like, well, are they married?
That's cold word. That's a euphemism.
Are they married, mommy? Like, no, son, they're not married. They can't be married. They're not allowed to be married. I think that you can be in a spot where you're committed to somebody and not have to put a ring on the finger. I mean, there's reasons to not. There's reasons to. I mean, you talk about there might be a little bit of aversion to wanting to combine bank accounts, to wanting to combine last names, to wanting to lose a last name, to have this weird, hey, one of you has one last name, one of you has the other. Maybe that's a reason why you don't go into a marriage. Maybe you don't give a damn about the state recognizing you as a legal entity. Maybe you'd prefer not to be a legal entity. Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of motivations there. I don't think that it's inherently negative or positive. Again, if you're voluntarily subscribing to it, I don't see a damn thing wrong with it. I don't have any experience with it, though, outside of the framework of before states allowed male and female to marry. That's the only context I have to it.
Yeah, I think you make some good points there. And the other thing I would say is that for a lot of people, just the consideration, the mental share of the pressures or the implied pressures of a technical marriage, that could be why somebody might be averse to a committed relationship, a marriage, and opt for a committed relationship, because effectively you get all the benefits of a marriage other than some of the financial stuff. And if you really wanted those benefits, there are some other ways you could achieve those by forming some LLCs and, creating the right type of structures. But yeah. So then what we have left is the open relationship, which is an agreement created by both parties to allow for relationships outside of their own. Now, to me, this is the halfway there of polyamorous. Now, reason I say that is because I think the biggest difference primarily is just that, from my understanding, I've never been in an open relationship. I guess you could call what I was in earlier in college an open relationship. But effectively the difference being that there's not that explicit over communication of what is happening outside of the relationship. Just like an open window does not mean that I know everything that's happening outside of that window, whereas polyamorous is more like you have a weather probe outside so that you know exactly what's happening with the weather and all of that. But I think open relationships for a lot of people is a good in-between step, because the polyamory is haven't been in it, man, but tangentially it was stressing me out, and the open relationship can serve as a good stepping stone for people who know that they want some optionality, but also know that they want to be with that person, and they would rather not deal with all the other stresses that come from having to be take on the oversharing that is kind of a part of the polyamorous relationship.
Yeah, I would say I've been in a spoken open relationship, and for those of you that now can't see my face, the camera jacked up. I'll own that one. But open relationships are something that I think the times that I've been in situations where I have been in a spot with somebody that I was engaging in, I guess, some sort of breakdown of an open relationship. It came back to us just not necessarily being at the place where we wanted to commit fully to one another. It wasn't necessarily that, hey, we're going to enter into emotional, That's
a great point. That's a great point.
An open relationship, and we're gonna intend to do this for the next 6 months. It was really like it's kind of, you're talking about it being a gateway potentially to polyamory or a middle ground. I think it's almost, though, a spot where in the interim, while you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, it could be a funnel to a more committed relationship.
You're absolutely right.
Now, it doesn't mean that it always goes that way, but I think it's something to think about.
It eases you in. You're absolutely right. And that would actually be what I'd recommend for people to start out with, because it can lessen the stress of because oftentimes people are dating. You might have 2 or 3 people that could be great partners, but, you still need a little bit more time to explore. So it is kind of that training wheel, so to say.
For sure. And that's up on time. So we appreciate y'all coming out.